bond should not be spent on tornado shelters in public schools. It should be spent on education. Representative Joe Dorman from Oklahoma has proposed that an already approved bond issue of $500 million be spent to fund tornado shelters in all public schools in Oklahoma. This proposal came about after the May tornado that happened just in May of this year. And that tornado killed 7 children while in a school. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm from Oklahoma. I'm from Moore, Oklahoma, where that tornado happened. Tornadoes are devastating. My family has been affected by all 3 of the most recent tornadoes in Oklahoma. My brother and his wife lost their house in this most recent tornado. They lost their dog. This is a picture of the devastation from the May 1999 tornado. This, right here, I believe, was my childhood home. Tornadoes are devastating. But the real issue is the state of education and funding in education in Oklahoma. If we were to spend $500 million on tornado shelters, what happens to the $500 million for education? What happens to the resources for the children? What happens to the salaries for the teachers? What happens to the maintenance and upkeep for the buildings? Again, for our children. I want to start today by giving you some statistics on tornadoes. In the last 120 years or so, there's been 149 tornadoes in the Oklahoma City area. Now you're thinking 149 tornadoes, that's a lot. Actually, that's just a little over 1 tornado a year in the last 120 years. There's only been 6 schools that have reported damage, and this was as of 2012, and only 1 school reporting fatalities. Your odds of dying in a tornado are only 1 in 60,000. Your odds of dying in a car crash, 1 in 84. While doing my research, I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll just move back to Oklahoma, sell my car, and live a healthy life. I love Colorado too much, and I enjoy the freedom of my vehicle, so I'm going to take my chances. Oklahoma, interestingly enough, is ranked 7th in the nation for tornadic activity, behind Florida, Kansas, Maryland, Illinois, Mississippi, and Iowa. So, with the odds of a tornado actually hitting a school, the funding needs to be spent for the education, not for tornado shelters. The real devastation is this number right here. Oklahoma is ranked 48th in the nation on spending in education. In 2008, when the recession hit, budget cuts all over. There was also an increase of 30,000 students into the Oklahoma school systems. They hired 1,000 fewer less teachers. These budget cuts have been so substantial that to be able to get back to where they were 4 to 5 years ago, you've got to have an additional $280 million on top of the approved $500 million budget. Oklahoma is failing for its budget for education. With these budget cuts, it's affected, like I said, the building maintenance, the upkeep of our buildings. There have been districts that have required mandatory thermostat settings in the classrooms. They have eliminated summer school programs. They have eliminated continuing education for the teachers and staff. They've adopted a 4-day school week, so making your school days longer. Budget cuts, layoff of teachers and staff, so that increases your classroom size. These all affect our children and our children's education. But this right here affects our teachers. We all agree that teachers are the most underpaid profession out there. And again, with the staggering statistics of Oklahoma, number 4 in the nation with the lowest teacher salary. Starting salary, $31,000. This right here blew my mind. A teacher with a 25-year plus experience with a doctorate, their base salary is $46,000 in Oklahoma. A school's budget, 96% of it is salaries for teachers. So imagine if you take that $500 million and you put it into education, what it's supposed to be for, that's going to the salaries for our teachers. These teachers work their butts off. They put their heart and soul into what they're doing for our students and for our future. Like I said, I'm from Oklahoma, but I also come from a family of educators. My sister-in-law is a teacher, my cousin's a teacher, and my aunt is a principal of a middle school in Oklahoma. I called her and I talked to her about this issue. And I said, what are your thoughts? How do you feel? She brought up a whole can of worms that I wasn't expecting. A lot of questions. That if this money that is already allocated to education goes into storm shelters. These storm shelters, a bond is taxpayer dollars. So if you put a storm shelter in a school, is it now a public storm shelter? Who's allowed to use that storm shelter? Is it going to be open during school hours only, or is it open all the time? Who's responsible to enforce who can go in and who can go out? Can you only say people? Can you allow your dogs in there? Who's allowed? Who's responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of the storm shelters? And who should have access? Who has a key? Who opens it up? My aunt, who's the principal of a school, lives 20 minutes away from this school. Is it her responsibility to go back and open up the storm shelter if a tornado's coming in the middle of the night? What about her safety? What about her family? There is a lot of issues with taking $500 million and putting it into storm shelters that we don't have the answers for. The answer is to keep the money into education and not into storm shelters. The storm shelters need to be at a local level, not a statewide decision. The money needs to be for education, for our children, and for our future. Thanks.